Today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to help you decide whether Gates of Hell Ostfront is the right World War II strategy game for you. By the end of this video, you will know what it's like to actually play this game, to help you make an informed decision. I'm not an Ostfront fanboy, just a strategy fan who took a chance on this game, so I could report back my findings to you, my fellow generals. First, give me 30 seconds to describe the game in a nutshell. If you're still intrigued after that, we'll go into more detail about how the game plays, the mechanics, and how it compares to other games you may have played. Ostfront looks and feels much like Company of Heroes, with the insane detail and deployment mechanics of Steel Division 2, and a tiny bit of War Thunder sprinkled on top. You command individuals, squads and tanks in a thrilling single-player campaign, a more traditional skirmish mode, and a strategic map mode where you research and unlock powerful units over time to form an increasingly dynamic army. But the real USP is the ability to take direct control of any individual, infantry or vehicle at any point during the game, a prospect that makes me as excited as unwrapping my very own tank on Christmas Day. The game released in June 21 with a ton of very positive reviews and is actually a DLC of Call to Arms, a modern-day tactical shooter released in 2018. However, in reality, the scale of Ostfront feels much more like a standalone game, rather than a simple DLC expansion. To clarify, the game's full name is Call to Arms, Gates of Hell Ostfront. A bit of a mouthful. So what does this game look like when you first load it up? You're greeted by a slick-looking menu and World War II appropriate music. We have single-player and multiplayer options, along with a library of the vast number of units within the game, and the usual video and audio options too. Unlike other RTS games, the single-player mechanics behave differently to the multiplayer, but more on that later. Let's start at the beginning, the tutorial. The tutorial will take you perhaps 30 minutes to complete and takes you through enough mechanics for you to start the campaign, but be prepared to do a lot of Googling afterwards, as it certainly does not go through everything. And even the bits it does go through can be confusing. You'll soon realise just how much control you can exert over your units. Hey you, holster your weapon. Unholster your weapon. Holster your weapon. But unfortunately, this many options leads to an interface that is confusing. Don't get me wrong. Once you know where the correct button is, it makes sense. But the game could do more to show you where those buttons are. There are some fan-made tutorials on YouTube and Steam, but they're long. Overall, the tutorial leaves you able to play the game fine, but it's likely you'll complete your first few missions without using half of the mechanics available to you. Much like Steel Division 2, the game is set on the Eastern Front of World War II, with an emphasis on authenticity. The single-player campaign does a fantastic job of throwing you into a desperate battle against the advancing Germans on a frozen battlefield, making use of the weapons available to you, whereas the multiplayer skirmish allows you to quickly take control of all of the mechanical giants of World War II, such as the King Tiger and the Russian monster KV-2. Anyone looking for a new way to experience the World War II setting, even if you're not a big strategy fan, should seriously consider this game, as the single-player campaign is compelling. If you're not too bothered about the World War II setting, but you do enjoy a good RTS game, we'll need to dig a little deeper to see if this is the right one for you. Let's go into more detail on the mechanics and reference other games to help you decide. In Ostfront, you spend most of your time ordering infantry and armour into key locations, working together to successfully attack or defend a point, then rinse repeat. This game is all about combined arms, focusing on infantry and armour, as ships and planes play a minimal role. If you like to get your hands dirty, you can tap F1 to order an infantry to throw a grenade, and for the most important grenade, you can take direct control and do it yourself. You can even cook the grenades to devastating effect, so in one moment you're commanding an entire battle, like Company of Heroes, then a few seconds later you're next to your fellow soldiers shooting a rifle from a trench or driving a tank, which is as awesome as it sounds. The game is micro-heavy. You'll often handpick where individual soldiers go. Even though your infantry may start the game in a squad, you can disperse them and reform the squads in an instant by simply highlighting them in whichever way suits you at the time. These groupings are reflected in a handy set of symbols on the left of the screen, where you can select squads and tanks at any time. Anti-tank guns will spawn with a team of 4. As those troops get killed, the remaining infantry operate it with less efficiency, But even when they're all killed, you can allocate other troops to man that gun, provided it's still in good working order. And you can choose which type of shell that gun will fire for greatest effect. Although large, your army will never be huge. For the most part, your army will comprise a handful of squads, a couple of artillery pieces, and a couple of tanks, while you take the role of a sniper, if you so choose. There is no base building in the traditional sense, but with engineers you do get to construct layered defences involving trench systems, barbed wire, tank traps and anti-tank or personnel mines. It can be incredibly satisfying to set up an intricate defence and see how it stands up to an assault from your opponent. It's not quite a replacement for the base building from other games, but keeping an engineer alive while they lay anti-tank mines before the next wave of enemy tanks arrive is sure to send your adrenaline levels through the roof. You don't have to build an economy in Ostfront. It's quite the opposite in the campaign, where you simply get what you're given, whereas the skirmish mode is much like Steel Division 2. Your resources tick up over time, and you can spend them on reinforcements when you have enough. Without the traditional base building and economy, the game allows you to concentrate on fighting. But what it does give you is an insanely detailed infantry system. You can look at the inventory of any soldier or weapon and see exactly how much ammunition and what kind of ammunition that individual has. And yes, when they run out, you need to find a way of replenishing that ammo, which might include scavenging from fallen comrades or enemies by holding down the C key to highlight discarded equipment, or the V key to view and loot fallen soldiers' ammo. Alternatively, you might invest in an ammo truck to automatically replenish soldiers within its radius. This level of detail is a real standout point for Ostfront. Although it sounds like a real handful, and at times it is, on the whole, you just need to ensure your big guns have enough of the right ammunition to avoid any embarrassing firing of blanks at a critical moment. This doesn't just apply to ammunition. Vehicles need to be refueled and repaired. So yeah, logistics and supplies are an important factor in Ostfront. You need to ensure your vehicles are in good working order and your troops have enough ammunition. And on the whole, this feels like a worthy replacement to having to build and maintain an economy. Deployment in the skirmish mode works much like Steel Division 2. You accumulate manpower over time and use this to deploy new units. More powerful units are more expensive and some are locked behind a timer. The units deploy at the edge of the map, so getting your troops where they're needed requires some logistics. This is where the different types of units can be combined to great effect. If you purchase a transport truck, you can use that to ferry infantry to the front line quickly, provided it doesn't explode. Most field guns can be hooked up to and towed by most vehicles, so they can move around much faster. A neat little mechanic is that the more units you have on the field, the slower your income goes up, adding a nice layer of strategy to the deployment of troops. Command points limit the amount of troops on the field at any one time, though these limits can be increased by certain units. And finally, we have doctrine points. Before a match, you select a particular doctrine, which will determine the types of units available to you and encourage a certain style of play, an emphasis on tanks, for example. And at the end of the game, you can spend doctrine points to deploy your best units to the field, but your doctrine points don't go up. Once they're gone, they're gone. These units, in many ways, are your final trump card. Vision is important, perhaps not to the extreme of Steel Division 2, but your tanks and field guns will be sitting back behind your infantry, using their range to pick off targets, so you must ensure they have a good line of sight while remaining as protected as possible. Your infantry will want to take advantage of cover as well, and you can control when your troops go prone, which can be surprisingly effective at keeping them alive when they're out in the open. Although powerful, your tanks aren't indestructible. Infantry can take down a tank, let alone an AT gun, so being aware of what they can see, and who can see them, is an important factor in keeping your tanks alive. The terrain has a huge impact on which units you should deploy and which doctrine you may choose. If you have a large open map with little cover, you want tanks. But on the other hand, if you're fighting over an area with a lot of buildings, those tanks will be incredibly vulnerable to infantry. You'll be zooming right into the map to see whether a slight hill is blocking the view of your machine gun. The level of detail when it comes to destruction is impressive too. You'll see fences, trees and telephone poles fall down or blow up if they're too close to an explosion. A nice extra bit of immersion there. There are a ton of different units in the game for both the Germans and the USSR, and you even see units from other countries such as Britain, because the Russians have access to the Churchill tank. There are a variety of different squads, such as the German Fallschirmjäger, for example, with different strengths and weaknesses. Plus, you get detachments for the more specialised infantry, such as anti-tank, machine gunners or engineers. A medic can revive fallen comrades as long as they're not blown to pieces, which is a nice touch you don't often see in RTS games. The quality of the squads can have a huge impact on their survivability. Their HP, their aim, the distance they can sprint all vary. You can use their price as a benchmark until you learn the differences between the units more intimately, which is where the unit library comes in handy. When playing a skirmish, you can select different eras of the war, which will affect the units available to you. Not only that, as I mentioned earlier, you can also select a doctrine, which will further change the units available to you, and will determine the big hitters you'll be bringing out in the late game. Unit knowledge is very important, so you can learn which guns will penetrate which armour, or you risk your shells bouncing off without leaving a scratch. The graphics when it comes to the environments are surprisingly gorgeous for an RTS game, but the units look average at best when up close in direct control mode. The sound effects, however, are some of the best in World War II strategy I've heard, especially the giant vehicles roaring to life. I found myself issuing new orders to tanks just to hear the engines fire up. The music is fine, not great, not bad, just what you would expect from a World War II strategy game, and it definitely heightens the tension in the stealth missions, so let's leave it there and move on. You can zoom in an impressive amount, but zooming out is limited to more traditional RTS levels, making it difficult to view the battlefield as a whole, placing more importance on the minimap, which is useful as it shows bullets being fired to help you track where the action is at any time. Although this game lacks the extreme zoomed out tactical map of Supreme Commander or Steel Division 2, the relatively small map size means you'll spend much of your time focused on the minimap to help you control the battlefield, which is a system that works well. By now, you've got a good idea of how the game plays and the basics of the mechanics, so let's examine how the game lets you use all of this in the various game modes. The single-player campaign is split into two, one as the USSR and the other as Germany. The campaign features a variety of scenarios from all-out warfare, sabotage behind enemy lines, and desperate defences. Each mission can be approached in any way you see fit. Sneak around taking out guards with a silenced pistol, or try going for a more direct approach. Poisoning a food pot at a barracks to take out the guards was a particular highlight, but where the game truly shines is in the desperate defense battles. I recall defending against an overwhelming German assault, acting as the rear guard to give my comrades enough time to escape. As I was running out of anti-tank options, I found an old field gun, got it repaired, found some shells for it, and added it to my weakening defense. Desperate moments like this is where the mechanics come together to provide an immersive World War II experience. Your traditional skirmish mode is a great way to experience the big units relatively quickly. My last match was a 4v4 against the AI, and it was pretty hectic. You can of course do all this online against real opponents. I'll keep checking up on the servers to see how many people are playing online multiplayer, and right now it's a mixed picture. Like many other strategy games, I suspect you will find a certain time of day is best for finding a game in your time zone. One of the more interesting game modes is the dynamic campaign, which adds deeper layers of strategy to the usual skirmish mechanics. You start with basic units and have limited research points to spend unlocking new units, forcing you to choose carefully as you won't be able to field a full army straight away. Once you've decided which units to unlock, you can begin to compile your whole army. You have a limited number of points to spend, and each unit takes up a specific number of points, giving you even more tough choices. Then finally, you can divide your whole army into those that will be part of Wave 1, Wave 2, and so on. You can also unlock additional waves as you progress. It's a difficult system to explain in the time we have, but hopefully that gives you a basic idea. After you've spent ages agonizing over these tough decisions, you're presented with a tactical map. You get to choose which battlefield you want to go to next, then you'll be plunged into a scenario against your opponent. If you win enough of these encounters, you will push your opponent back until there's a last stand to win the campaign as a whole. This mode takes time to fully understand and appreciate, but having scratched the surface, I can tell this will appeal to many strategy fans who aren't even that bothered about the World War II setting. It's fun, and a different take on the formula which, when combined with a stellar single-player campaign and fast and furious skirmish mode, gives Ostfront a heck of a lot of replayability, and therefore value for money. I played this game for approximately 20 hours, and this is what I would say to anybody considering purchasing the game. The level of detail means a steep learning curve, but push through this and you'll realise the level of control you can exert on your units is very satisfying once it all clicks. And I don't see this learning curve as enough to put off a strategy gamer. You've likely seen much steeper before. The level of storytelling in this game is some of the best I've seen in the RTS genre, and I would go as far as saying it's better than Company of Heroes. There are bugs in this game, nothing game-breaking, but it can be annoying to order a squad into a trench, only for two of them to stand beside the trench and be blasted to smithereens. But we should bear in mind this is a relatively new game that is receiving a lot of love and attention from the developers, so the hope is these minor bugs, although annoying when aggregated together, should be patched out over time. One of the main strengths of Ostfront comes with its diversity. The campaign allows you to approach the same mission in different ways, so you could easily play through each mission more than once. The skirmish mode mixes things up by letting you choose which part of the war you're fighting in and select doctrines which both have a significant effect on the units available and therefore your playstyle. Then finally we have the dynamic campaign, which mixes things up once again by introducing the research system. We've established that this is a solid game, but how much is it going to cost you? The base game, Call to Arms, is currently $14.99, £12.99 or €14.99. The Ostfront DLC is $34.99, £26.99 and €29.99. You can expect to see discounts of 50% from Call to Arms and 25% from the Ostfront DLC. If you are a World War II strategy enthusiast who enjoys Company of Heroes or Steel Division 2, this game has a lot to offer you, and you should consider picking it up in the next sale. If you're a strategy gamer who's not a fan of the World War II setting, or you like World War II but don't play strategy games, I suggest wishlisting Call to Arms and Ostfront to keep an eye on the sale price, to see if it comes down to a more acceptable level in the future. Ostfront has its faults. It has a handful of annoying but not game-breaking bugs. If you zoom in enough, the unit models look basic and the AI can be pretty stupid at times. But all of this is overshadowed by a thrilling and highly replayable campaign, a solid skirmish mode, and the intriguing dynamic campaign. This variety and longevity provides good value for money if you're a fan of the genre. If you're simply looking for a new way to experience World War II, I would highly recommend this game over the competition. If you're a Company of Heroes or Steel Division 2 veteran looking for competitive play, you'll slip comfortably into the skirmish mode like a latex glove. If you like managing inventory and logistics, you need look no further than Gates of Hell Ostfront. I hope you found this summary useful. If you did, I have plenty of others, so feel free to check those out. See ya.